Okay, with us today, we have Chrissy Kriskowski. Ms. Kriskowski is the current president of the Butte Food Co-op Board of Directors. She has been involved in the Butte Food Co-op since the conception of the project and served on the initial steering committee. She is a strong believer that food co-ops can be a source of strength and empowerment for all communities, but especially one like Butte, with its long-standing history of working cooperatively. Ms. Kriskowski sees a food co-op as an opportunity for farmers and ranchers to grow their business, a connection point for consumers to the food they eat, a vital driver to the local economy, and an inclusive community and educational hub that advocates for healthy nutrition practices. Ms. Kriskowski received her BA and MA in public health and her MBA from Johns Hopkins University. A lifelong fitness, health, and nutrition advocate, she has over 18 years of combined experience in consulting and the nonprofit sectors. She currently lives in Butte with her husband, Nate, and their 3 dogs, Bruno, Dewey, and Maya. And is Lindsay with us? Let me go ahead and introduce her. Lindsay Gutierrez is the steering committee chair for the Montana Food Hub Co-op. The project brings together many of her passions in one place, including strengthening local food systems, supporting entrepreneurs, and bringing the best food directly into the community. Lindsay believes that food is the heart of a community and culture. By building the Montana Food Hub as a co-op, the community is directly involved and invested in the entire life of their food from seed to table and back around. As the owner of Nourish, Lindsay already engages the community in their food through health-focused cooking classes and programs, as well as a food truck. This brings together her culinary training, as well as her BS in health and wellness and MS in nutrition and integrative health, with a focus in community health education. Montana Food Hub will create opportunities for better food, healthier humans and soil, and growth of food businesses for the region. We have Cole Mannix with us from the Old Salt Co-op. Cole is part of an extended family that has ranched together in Montana's Blackfoot Valley since 1882. In 2012, he helped form the Ranchers Original Meat Company to add value to livestock and promote land stewardship, serving as director of operations from 2014 to 16. From 2017 to 20, Cole worked for an agriculture and conservation organization called Western Landowners Alliance, becoming an associate director in 2019. As founder and manager of Old Salt Co-op, he aims to help build a supply chain that regenerates land, habitat, and community. Cole did undergraduate degrees in both biology and philosophy at Helena's Carroll College and a master's in theology at Boston College. He enjoys living in Helena with spouse Eileen and sons Finn and Charlie, seeking out live music wherever it can be found. And I'd like to welcome our moderator, Tracy McIntyre. Tracy is a native of Eureka. She has served 12 years as the economic developer for North Lincoln County. During her tenure, she averaged over $1 million in investment into the community annually and led the creation and development of a Tobacco Valley business incubator. In 2009, she began working with the Montana Cooperative Development Center, a cooperative development specialist, and took the reins as the organization's executive director in 2019. Tracy is currently working on several initiatives and cooperative projects, including housing, childcare, value-added and sustainability in agriculture, shared services and labor, cooperative education, and bridging the gap between cooperative development and the overall economic development community. She is an active board member of the Montana Economic Developers Association, completing 2 terms as president. During her leisure time, McIntyre can often be found with a fly rod in hand, fishing one of the many excellent streams in Montana, spoiling her niece and nephews, volunteering for the local museum, or exploring rural communities with friends. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tracy to moderate today's session. And thank you all.
Thank you. Excuse me. I can't even talk as we start this off. So thank you, Mark, for the introductions. And thank you to the panelists for joining us today. I am super excited to be part of it. Robin, thank you for reaching out to Montana Co-op Development Center to put together a panel on co-ops. We are very passionate about the work that we do. We love co-ops, and it is kind of a re-emerging trend all across the state. So the way that we've kind of outlined today's panel discussion is I'm going to do a quick overview of what it means to have a co-op in Montana, kind of the different forms. And then I'm going to have each one of the panelists do a presentation on their respective cooperatives. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. At any point, as Mark said, please put chats or in the chat a comment if you want to interrupt with questions. I welcome that during mine. I enjoy having back and forth, but we do want to stay on schedule as well. So we'll kind of keep this moving forward. So I'm going to do a quick screen share. Hopefully, always happens that you think you're completely ready and then you can't find them. There it is. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, okay, I got a thumbs up from Mark, so evidently we're good. And then we'll just start the slides. Sorry. It doesn't seem like how many times you do Zoom. Every time it's still a little on the awkward side at first. So first, just a little bit about who we are. So the Montana Cooperative Development Center is a statewide economic development organization that uses the cooperative business model to address community and business needs. We are a 501c3 and we serve the entire state of Montana. Also housed in our office is a statewide trade association for all cooperatives and all sectors of co-ops, and that's the Montana Council of Cooperatives. So that's a 501c6. That mission really is about uniting and promoting the cooperative community, while the Co-op Development Center is creating new and adding them into the cooperative community. We have a staff of 5, 2 are in Helena, and 3 of us are here in the Great Falls office. We do work mostly remote, which is kind of nice from our homes, but you can see us gathering every once in a while. Davy Madison is our program director, and her and I are the 2 that are mostly on the ground helping build new co-ops. So you'll see us kind of all over the place. Because Montana is such a large state, we also have contracted work with cooperative development specialists and other economic development organizations. You can see here, and I see that we have Eastern Plains with us today. It's good to see Alyssa, and I think I see Beth kind of in and out. And they're one of our specialists over there in Eastern Montana. So these guys are ways to kind of enter into the cooperative world. If you can't reach us at the state office, your local economic developers can definitely start the process. The cooperative ecosystem in Montana is actually very strong. And so we have the 2 organizations in our office, but we work very closely with the Electrical Co-op Association, the Telecommunication, and the Montana Credit Unions. All of those kind of work together to serve the Montana cooperatives. Our Council of Co-ops is where the Agriculture Council kind of lays underneath. And then we also work with a series of legal and accounting professionals that we continually try to grow and engage and build that capacity as well. So people often ask us, like, co-ops, do they make a difference? So last year in 2020, we did have the economic impact completed. And the question that we asked Pat Barkey and his team at BBER was, what would happen if co-ops in Montana disappeared? And Montana would lose $7.6 billion in our economy, and over 33,000 people that are attracted or retained into the state is because of a cooperative community. And so, yeah, we definitely see us as an impact, and it's one that's growing, and it's one that we're super proud of. And breaking down these numbers a little bit more in a second. In our current workload in CDC, which is the Cooperative Development Center, these are co-ops that we're currently working on kind of in the food resiliency and ag. You're going to hear from Old Salt. You'll hear from the Montana Food Hub. We also just incorporated the Montana Premium Processing Co-op. That's a meat co-op up in Havre that is producer owned. We've got hemp cooperatives. We've got the farm to table. I see Peggy and some of those going here today. Thank you for joining. And then just a multitude of other types of work, all kind of around this conversation of food resiliency, food distribution, and processing. Though ag related is not all of our work, we also work in across all sectors. So we are doing a lot within childcare, housing, workforce conversion. So if you have a business that is thinking about selling or employees want to take it over or something like that, we do these worker-owned conversions. And then investment co-ops, which I'm not going to have time to get into today, but if you have questions, we'll definitely visit about those. There's 4 different kinds of cooperative structures. This first one, the Cooperative Association, is a chapter 15 that just references a chapter in the MCAs. And that's our for-profit. The co-ops that you're hearing from today are all within that. And then we have 2 agricultural ones and a cooperative utility. Those are distinctive in the way that they can be formed and how they are operated. So we just like to kind of keep it up. We're one of the few states that actually has this for-profit cooperative association. So it's exciting and it gives us a lot of flexibility on how we can build co-ops in Montana. Ownership in Montana can be all across the board. I kind of mentioned these: producer, consumer, worker. You can also have a hybrid model of all of those. You can have independent businesses coming together and creating a co-op. We are getting all sorts of unique and kind of just new concepts coming out as we're recovering from COVID and continue to see that. We're seeing a lot of communities seeking the cooperative business model to address their things that are going on. All co-ops should have a user benefit, are user owned, and are user controlled. I believe these slides may be available later, so I know I'm going through them pretty fast. So feel free to look at them later, or you can give us a call and make sure my information is put in the chat. At the end of the day, co-ops have 2 forms of stock. The common stock are the owners. They're the ones with the voting powers, and they are the ones that really should be utilizing the cooperative. And then we have a preferred stock option. Please ignore the fact that I can't spell preferred, evidently. And that is really your investment opportunity. So it's a non-voting stock option, but it does allow for the co-op to give out a return, though it's small, to investors. Co-ops, there's over 2 million co-ops across the globe. And every co-op adopts these 7 guiding principles. These were actually formed in the late 1800s. So co-ops are not a new form of business by any means. They actually can date back to like 1778 with Benjamin Franklin. And so, but these guiding principles were adopted, and they are ones that whenever we work with a new co-op or even an existing co-op, we make sure that they're kind of addressing and participating in these principles. And then this is our scary slide. People are like, whoa, that's a lot. But truthfully, this is why we're here and what we can do. And so these are the steps on how you form a cooperative. And our office is with you along the entire way. Really, the main section is this number 2, where you have formed a steering committee, and you're going to hear kind of from our panel what that looked like and how they moved forward. But this is where it's really formed. And then the last of the 13 steps kind of move quickly until you become into the capitalization and move into operation. That can take some time too, as with any business. So that's a very quick overview of what we've got going on in the cooperative world. And I'm going to just, unless there's some specific questions on co-ops in general. Mark, do you see any? I didn't see any pop up. Nope. So I'm going to turn it over to Chrissy with the Butte Food Co-op, and she's going to give you an overview of what they have been working on. Thanks, Chrissy, for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So you should be able to see that now. So can everyone see that? Good, awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy Kriskowski, and I'm the current board president for the Butte Food Co-op here in Butte, Montana. And I want to first give a quick shout out to my fellow board member, Kalina Miller, who is here listening today. She's been a huge part of this development process as well. We have a wonderful board here, a very engaged board, and we've been working really hard to try to get this project off the ground and running. So today I'm going to share with you our very abbreviated story of the Butte Food Co-op, why we started organizing, how we did it, our vision, short-term and long-term, and where we really are in our cooperative development timeline. So in his book, Grocery Story, A History of Food Co-ops, John Steinman writes that co-ops are like the pioneer plants that first appear on the landscape following a forest fire, society's fireweed and morel mushrooms. So historically, when people have really recognized co-ops, it's been during a time of economic or social change, maybe even social turmoil, because co-ops are really known for their resiliency. So the story of the Butte Food Co-op started back in 2019, and it was really spurred by some economic change here that we had. The back-to-back closing of 2 grocery stores, the Stokes and the Hennessy Market, within 6 months of each other. With really no alternatives to large chain grocers, Safeway and Walmart are really the only ones that we have, full service grocery stores that we have here in Butte. The community came together in town hall to discuss bringing a different type of full service grocery store, a cooperative model, to Butte. And many folks in Butte were already members of the Community Food Co-op in Bozeman, so they knew what a cooperative store could potentially look like here in Butte. The cooperative model store was really brought up to the forefront by 2 of our board members, Julie Jackshaw of Headwaters RC&D and Steve Thompson of NCAT, in this sort of let's bring it back to the people, let's bring it back to the community approach. So the cooperative model, it's community-led, as Tracy said, and therefore can really be tailored to meet the specific needs of a community, since co-ops are owned and governed by their members, or what we call member owners. The overall desires for a food cooperative here in Butte was really threefold. So first, the community did recognize that having a grocery store that was owned and supported by the people that live and work in Butte would have a greater local economic impact. A cooperative, and you hear this a lot in the cooperative world, literally moves money from Wall Street to good old local Main Street. So it would keep people in Butte to shop in Butte. And there are a significant number of folks who will drive 70, 80, 90 miles to Bozeman or Missoula to do a portion of their grocery shopping, myself included sometimes. So people will actively seek out other communities because they can't find what they're looking for here in their own community. So that was one reason. The second was that Butte recognized there was a huge gap in its access to local, fresh, healthy, and affordable produce and meats. There was a big interest in helping support our local farmers and ranchers when able to. And there was a really big demand to create like this community hub that really brought people together to provide food and nutrition education for everyone in the community. And the third reason was that co-ops by design are a little bit more nimble and flexible. They're not as bound by red tape as maybe a large chain grocery store is, and they're very responsive to community needs. So yes, they need profit to sustain, but they also have what we call a triple bottom line. So profit is flanked by people and planet. And they tend to have a little bit more, that short-term and long-term systemic impact because they have this flexibility. They have that less red tape. They are quickly able to pivot, address a community needs such as access, such as affordability, food security. And they have really the ability to problem solve on a local level and create solutions that benefit the specific food needs that exist in their communities. So those were sort of the 3 reasons why, we decided in Butte this would be a good idea. And these 3 reasons really provided the basis of our mission, vision, and our values. So our mission, what are we going to do and for whom? The Butte Food Co-op, it's going to be community owned, it's going to be community run, it's going to be community focused and governed. And we really wanted to bring improved access to high quality, locally sourced, when possible, healthy and delicious foods to nourish the Butte community, as well as some of the smaller surrounding rural communities that we have here. So how are we going to do this? We want to improve access for all. We want to keep folks in Butte to do their grocery shopping so they don't have to go elsewhere for their groceries. We want to provide an alternative to a large chain grocer here in our community. We want to be able to support local and small scale farmers, ranchers and suppliers. And we really want to be that central location, that community hub here in Butte for not only groceries, but also education, particularly relating to health, wellness, and nutrition. And we really envision this co-op to be a leader in providing various solutions around the food security issues that we have here, access to healthy foods, as well as overall sustainability in our food system. So our vision is really to bring together, I keep using the word hub because that's what I really think about, really it being a central location. Being this hub that with the common goal to collectively grow a healthy, a supportive community and a more sustainable food system here in Southwest Montana. So while we've always had a pretty clear mission, vision, and our values, what we didn't always have was a very clear path. So after that first initial meeting in June of 2019, there was a ton of momentum moving this co-op forward. People were super excited about it. But what we didn't know at the time was that opening a cooperative grocery store is a very complex and lengthy process. So luckily, we enlisted the help of some outside sources to help really guide us along in this process. So first was MCDC, Montana Cooperative Development Center. Tracy gave a great overview of what they've done, but they were really critical in helping us understand the legal aspects of starting a cooperative. So Tracy, Davey, and the MCDC team really guided us through that complex process of what needed to be done prior to incorporation, and as well as insight in determining what kind of member owner equity options we were going to offer our member owners. So we ended up going with a common stock option, which is basically our member owner dues, as well as a preferred stock option. So second, we also sought out experts specifically in the food co-op space. Food co-op initiative has been vital in our development as well. So they're a national nonprofit who provides mostly free resources specifically to startup food co-ops. And it was really FCI who got us to pump the brakes a little bit and take a step back and get us to understand that the process, the process for developing co-op is long, it's complex, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but really had us focus on those critical success factors to make sure that we open this co-op and we open it correctly. And because of FCI's guidance, our timeline went from sort of this basic, like, okay, we're going to A and we're just going to go to B here, to a little bit more complex, detailed process. So this, how it's going is really the development timeline that Food Co-op Initiative recommends us following. They call it the 3 stages of development, even though there's technically 5, which are incredibly detailed and really walk you through the process of what needs to be in place in order to move your food co-op along. So where are we now? So the Butte Food Co-op is fully incorporated in the state of Montana as a consumer-owned Chapter 15 cooperative. We have 745 confirmed member owners. That's our common stock, and our member ownership starts fairly low. It starts at $50 with a sliding scale for seniors, students, and qualifying members, or those who qualify for state assistance programs. We also have 119 confirmed preferred shareholders. So our preferred shareholders, which as Tracy explained, don't have any voting rights, but they help us raise some equity. Those shares start at $500 per share. To date, we've raised about $162,000 through member owner equity and additional $25,000 from grants. And most of our initial recruitment for member ownership was done right in the middle of COVID. So we relied heavily on social media campaigns, word of mouth, community meetings via Zoom. And this past spring, we were able to secure a booth at our farmers market because it did start back up after COVID. And we were averaging about 5 to 6 new member owners for each market that we attended. We also started a member ownership and outreach committee that's led by one of our super engaged board members who has done a phenomenal job of engaging this group to really take the lead on member owner recruitment and those outward facing events that we have for the co-op. Our board is a board of 7 and we can only do so much work. So with these co-ops, it's critical of engaging your member owners to sort of help some of these projects get off the ground. So we are currently in what we call stage 2A, where we are testing our feasibility, so specifically market, financial capacity, and site. We had a market study done back in 2019 to answer really the big question of, can Butte's demographics support a cooperative grocery store? As I said earlier, we saw 2 grocery stores close in a 6-month period. So this market study was really, really critical to our overall development. The short of it is, yes, we can, but our market is a bit atypical because of cooperatives. It doesn't quite check all the boxes super nicely and neatly like maybe some other communities do. And there are certain aspects that we have to have locked into place, such as our location, where it is going to be critical, doing community education, and what type of grocery store we're going to offer here in Butte. So that really needs to be locked in for the store to be successful and sustainable. So right now our big focus is on our financial feasibility, determining how we can best afford to build out our store. And we are actually using some outside experts in the food co-op space to assist with our financial feasibility study. We've covered a lot of ground in 2.5 years, and it hasn't always been the smoothest of sailing. We've hit several obstacles and road bumps along the way, and we will expect to hit a few more as we continue our development. So I do want to hit on a few of those because I think they are critical for folks that might be looking to bring a food co-op to their community. First is our board capacity. We're a working board, so we're pre-hiring of a general manager. We're responsible for pretty much everything, but specifically we have to oversee governance, we have to oversee business development, and we have to oversee education and outreach activities. So for a 7-person board, this is a lot. We are volunteers, we all work full or part-time, we all have a lot going on. So having the capacity to move this project forward is a pretty tall order. Involving other member owners to help us carry out different projects has been really important and super helpful. But board capacity has definitely been something that has been a big challenge for us. The second is capital, and this is probably more on the horizon, but as a cooperative, the community is responsible for raising money for the store. So while there are some loans out there specifically for co-ops, most food co-ops, according to FCI, aim to raise about 50 to 70% of their required capital from their member owners through common stock, through preferred stock or member loans, and non-traditional funds, such as grants. So we have not yet started our capital campaign. We're waiting on our financial feasibility study, but we have raised about 1/10 of what we expect we need. The bright side of this is that we've raised this money without really doing any formal fundraising. Again, we haven't launched a capital campaign yet. We've done a little bit of grant writing, and we've done some basic member owner outreach. So we are very hopeful that with a little bit more targeted approach, we will continue to raise money, especially when we launch our capital campaign. And the third is finding the location. So this is something that if I had $1 for every hour of sleep that I've lost worrying about location, we probably would have funded this project by now. Where is it going to be? That tends to be the big question that we get asked by folks. There are a lot of strong emotions around location in Butte, explaining to folks that, we're not quite there yet. We still need to conduct our financial feasibility study so we can understand how much we have to raise for this project. It can be a pretty tough conversation to have. People can get pretty crabby about it. But what we do know from our market study is that it needs to be approximately 7,200 square feet, which with about 4,500 of that being retail space. It has to be visible from the street. It must be accessible by car, by foot, by public transit to accommodate the various types of members that are or shoppers that we will have. And it has to have parking. So FCI has cautioned us that the lack of parking can dramatically change the model of a store and potentially the overall sales volume. So that's a big factor in this. Particularly in Montana, you don't want to be sort of wheeling your grocery cart like 3 blocks down in the middle of winter. And as a board, our job is to be accountable to our member ownership. So this is a big part, and a big part of that accountability really is to ensure that we build the right store for our community, and that it is sustainable over time and that it is viable for many, many years to come. So what is next for us? As I said, we're in stage 2A feasibility according to FCI's development timeline. So in the next couple months, we'll be focusing on some government stuff. So for governance, we're in the middle of our board elections. We're continuing to lock down our board policies and processes to improve overall board alignment. this might sound like a sort of a snooze fest, but it's to most people, you know, they may not realize there's a lot going on in the background of co-ops, and this stuff is really critical to make sure that you have a well-oiled machine as you start to make some bigger decisions for the co-op. Business development, we are beginning our pro forma work with Don Moffitt of Colluminate. He's going to utilize some national co-op data to really put together a detailed pro forma for us, our income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement projections, so we can have more detailed financial projections and therefore understand how we can best afford to build this store. And then member owner outreach. So we're continuing to educate our members about co-ops using a variety of social media platforms, as well as continuing our recruitment efforts in person when possible. Our goal is to have about 2,000 members by the time the store opens. So we're about a third of the way there right now. So that's a little story about the Butte Food Co-op. I have my email here. If you guys if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them for you. I can talk for hours and hours about our history, where we're going, our why again. So let me know if you have any questions, and I will turn it back over to Tracy.
Great. Thank you so much, Chrissy. Even though I was involved towards kind of the end of your incorporation, it was right as I was taking over, I learned stuff today. So I was like, wow, look at that. So I love when we're on panels and we're learning from each other too. And I think what you guys have done in Butte has been such a great example. We get asked a lot when we're out in Montana, how did Butte do it? And what are they all doing and stuff. So I think that your guys' model is really breaking some ground for other communities on food access and availability. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and go to Cole. Cole with Old Salt. He's focusing more on a producer/employee owned co-op. So a little bit different from the consumer owned type aspect of the Butte one. And so that's something to always keep in mind, guys, is the ownership kind of dictates a little bit about how the co-op will be managed, governance, and all of that kind of stuff. Cole, do you want to tell us about Old Salt Post or Old Salt Co-op? And also, everybody, please keep your questions. If you have some, we're going to try to track them in the chat. But after Cole and Lindsay present, we'll start opening up for full questions. Thanks for coming, Cole.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for all your help with the Co-op Development Center. And thanks to Arrow for hosting this. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Before, I have some slides to tell you a little bit about the co-op itself, but I thought maybe I'd start off by just sharing why we formed it a little bit more informally, which is that in 2012, I got out of school and was working at Carroll College in Helena. And my family ranches in the Helmville area, the Blackfoot Valley. And we raised maybe 1,300 head of mother cows. We've had a small beef business, grass-finished beef business. We sell about 150 animals through that, and we've had that for about 15 years. And it grew really fast in the early years to its current capacity, and then it really hasn't grown very fast at all. It's grown very incrementally since then. And we just ran into a situation where the market, the grocery store and restaurant market that we were selling to was limited, and the processing was incredibly limited. And we thought that in order to, we just kind of needed to stay at that small scale until something changed. We formed, so I got out of school and they were forming a larger co-op to try to scale up their grass-fed beef efforts. And they got 120 ranches together and formed a co-op. They were in several different states in the West. And our goal was to market lean meats, grass-fed lean meats, domestic, to groups like Chipotle and hospitals that were interested in a low-cost domestic volume supply of grass-fed beef. We were trucking cattle to Greeley, Colorado, and we were, selling semi-loads at a time. And then in 2015, country of origin labeling was repealed in Congress, and we basically lost our value proposition really quickly overnight. We could not distinguish our domestic grass-fed beef from foreign. Foreign was much cheaper. And at the same time, our small processor in Greeley had a heart attack and died. We lost our this processing partner we had worked really hard to gain. And so this next step here for me was basically a few years stewing about how to do something with a similar purpose, which is to return more food dollar to the people who are stewarding the land and take better care of our land, but with a very different business model. And you know, we sell 150 animals a year locally, but we sell, you know, but we raise 1,300 mother cows and many calves each year. And so 95% of what we raise is still sold out of state anonymously to someone who cannot know, you know, the effort that we put in and the care that we have for the land. And we have a couple of other friends, the Hibbert family near Adel, Montana. They have a ranch much larger than ours. The Anderson family manages the J. Barrel ranches that have a place near Melville in the Centennial Valley. The Hibberts were part of the co-op, the Salt of the Earth co-op that we had formed in 2012. They were on the board of that. They were involved. And so they, like us, lost money and lost a lot of time and effort spent when that co-op failed and closed up. And then the Andersons and J. Barrel have also had their own experiences with the challenge of trying to grow a local grass-fed brand. And so the reason we formed this co-op is to take another run at what is a really hard thing. And the big challenges were everybody had failed and lost money. And so we're very conservative about risking much on what has only become a more consolidated beef industry since then. We did not believe that either grocery or restaurant could be our market. And we also had just a very limited amount of capital that folks were willing to risk. And so I went to work kind of building a business plan in June of 2020, reaching out to my family's operation. You know, it's an extended family operation, so there was a lot of just sales work to them to share the model and the idea with them, reaching out to the Hibberts, reaching out to the Andersons. They together really share a lot of not only livestock production protocols, but land management values. And so that was a good base to build from. And then the other part is that we needed to get good at marketing. We needed to build a brand that could justify the processing investment that we're going to need to make. And for that, ranchers are busy people, and they also just don't have all of the skill sets it takes to get something totally to market. And we knew that the meat processing skill set in particular is a really important one, that labor challenge. And so we formed as a multi-stakeholder co-op, a Chapter 15 cooperative association with Class A ranch members and Class B worker members, two different forms of patronage. And we really wanted to provide the opportunity for employees who got it, wanted it, had the capacity to do it, were fun to be around, to become owners. One member, one vote, just like the ranches. And to team up those butchers and chefs and creatives with the ranches to create a brand that could really move product. So our goal as a company now, Old Salt Co-op formed in 2021. And our goal is to move everything that the founding ranches can produce and then to expand our membership. We may do a little bit of expanding before we move all the beef cattle that these ranches produce, because our goal is to add other species like hogs and lamb and poultry. And our mission really is to strengthen society by strengthening its connection with working ranches. We do not believe, again, that that kind of the sell to a distributor, process, sell to a distributor, sell to a grocery or restaurant model can be successful for us to achieve this goal of, instead of selling 95% of what we produce out of state, selling it in state to people who have a chance of knowing the landscapes that we produce in and caring about those landscapes. So our model is direct to consumer. We plan to deliver via a CSA to between 7,500 and 10,000 Montana families. We're not opposed to branching into nearby urban markets like Coeur d'Alene or Spokane, but the point is folks that have some connection to these landscapes. So the goal is a direct-to-consumer meat CSA, and we plan to, the marketing is a challenge. We just never felt that a website was going to be, digital marketing was going to be sufficient. And so we decided to use restaurants, starting with our own couple of restaurants, to have 100 or 200 customers in the door on a daily basis, hopefully, that we could share the story with and do something concrete. And so we launched our first one just this past 1 month ago, and we had our grand opening yesterday. And with that, I'm going to start sharing a few slides just to give you a sense of what the co-op is starting to look like. Tracy, how am I doing on time?
I think we're okay. Yeah.
So Old Salt, the name is I had this Salt of the Earth Ranchers Cooperative previously, and this was just a little bit punchier take on the same thing, which is basically that we want to be salt of the earth. We want to enhance our landscapes rather than degrade them. That's the goal. And it's not just about regenerative agricultural practices, it's about regenerative customers. If you don't get the customers to support the practices don't last. And so this is a brand that's trying to be made to look like our customers as much as it looks like the ranches. We're Old Salt together. If we can basically just build stronger relationships with each other and take care of our landscapes and create a more resilient local system. Again, the goal is to flip this 95% the other way around. Right now, 95% of it is sold anonymously somewhere to someone, and we want to know these folks. And we think we have a chance of, at least for 7,500 customers, 10,000 customers, that they can have some kind of in-person contact with us, whether it's through our restaurants, through our events, or through ranch tours that we hold, catering events. Our model is basically these different enterprises. Our first one being Old Salt Outpost in Helena, which is a burger and fries concept, to be our marketing. We also plan to have a music festival called Old Salt Festival, a little bit similar to trying to take Sarah Calhoun's leadership and see if we can't get people out to these landscapes. Each ranch once per, we'll hold the first one hopefully in the Blackfoot next fall, and then it will rotate to the member ranches from there. And then finally, restaurant partnerships. Again, this is not the way we move product, but our goal is to build a relationship with a couple restaurants in each major Montana urban area that use our products on their menu and then can help tell our story to their customers. And in the meantime, we can be a local food solution for their establishment. So the Outpost, as I mentioned, is our first little enterprise. Very simple menu in a leased space within Helena's Gold Bar. Late night hours, 4 to 11. And yeah, we're a month into this. We couldn't get a single staff person. It was really interesting. We advertised Craigslist, Indeed, all these electronic platforms. We didn't get a single staff person. So our core co-op staff just staffed this thing until we started getting people to show up and hand in applications once it seemed fun. And now we've got a really good team. And so that labor component, everybody's finding real challenges with that. But we're just sort of trying to have faith that if we start things that mean something, people will show up. And so far they are. Old Salt Depot is an effort to restore an old stone warehouse building in Helena along the railroad tracks, Bozeman Avenue in Helena, which would be an expansion of Gulch Distillery here in town, a public house restaurant, a butcher shop, and a small market that celebrates local products. And if all goes well, the architects have been with us the last few days. If all goes well, we will launch that in 2023, and we'll begin restoring it next year. We plan to put a slaughter facility, hopefully in Winston by next fall, which will not only process co-op cattle, about 75 head per week capacity to begin with, but also it will do custom processing for other producers nearby. And then Old Salt Boxcar is the working name for our events enterprise. The way this is all structured, the co-op is sort of the umbrella company, and then each one of these enterprises is a wholly owned LLC that the co-op owns. And so the Outpost is the first example of that. I mentioned events and brand partnerships. This is what the slaughter facility looks like. It's built out of shipping containers by a company in Northwest Washington. And it's, as you can see, it's modular. You can scale up from this phase 1 to add add modular units as you need more capacity, but you risk less in the upfront investment by far. And the thing is movable if it does need to be sold. Myself and a wonderful guy named Ross Eikenberry, who came from the world of online sales. Nick Wiseman, who's a DC restaurateur and friend of mine. Micah Eller, here locally in Helena. Folks know as a person who is has a lot of history and talent in the restaurant world. Andrew Mace is originally from Laurel, Montana, but has been a chef and butcher in Portland for 15 years, and he's in the process of moving back. It's his concept at the restaurant. And Caroline is a classmate of mine who's focusing on marketing for us. And then the 3 ranches that I mentioned. Here's some of our people. Just for a little bit of color in a presentation that's a little bit gray. Although Leopold said that land is community, and we really believe that that's that expansive notion of what land is. It includes human life and non-human life and the whole spectrum. That's what we are trying to invest in. And we feel that COVID sort of made us feel like, yep, we're about at our most vulnerable. Let's invest close to home to rebuild our food system. And I guess I'll just end by saying that our whole project, from beginning it in June 2020 to the completion of the big story I just told you, is going to cost $15 million. We are working with a bank called Steward as a wonderful partner based on the East Coast, but now they have their first Montana staff member in Bozeman. We are hoping that's hopefully 60% of our capital stack. 20% of our capital stack is that we are going after new market tax credits. And then the final 20% is a combination of grants that we are chasing and private investment. As I mentioned, the co-op members, the founding co-op members, the workers don't really have money, and the producers were very unwilling to risk much on what has been a very challenging meat industry where they have a lot of bumps and bruises. And so we kept the membership incredibly small, $5,000 to buy in for both producers and workers. The workers have not had to pay yet. They will take that out of their paycheck as we go. And then we structured the ranch buy-in so that as the co-op begins moving their livestock, they buy marketing units. And so they've each had to buy their first 100 marketing units for 100 head of beef cattle at $250 a piece. So that brought $20,000 of capital from each of the 3 ranches. We will begin launching our preferred investment round here soon, but we mostly view that as a way for the ranches to buy out more expensive money later as we get on our feet. And so the main way we are raising private capital is through a revenue-based financing model, which is basically a promissory note for private investors. We've raised a couple $100,000 now that way. I believe we have about $750,000 verbally committed. And we are, if we can raise the last $750,000 here in the next couple of months, we will be able to move forward with some of these bigger ideas. So yeah, that's, I guess, how we've just tried to balance keeping the control with the producers and the workers and getting the outside capital that we're going to need to make this happen. And we've really received a lot of support from MCDC and MBAC here in town that we're sure grateful for. So thanks for letting me share it a little bit with you, and I'm anxious for the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you, Cole. And you do have a question. I wrote it down, Robin, so we'll definitely follow back up with Cole on that question. If you guys are in Helena, I'm going to give another shout out. Great hamburgers and those potato things that you guys have. I was like, I don't know, but then I ended up eating all. I wouldn't even share them. So I'm telling you guys, if you're in Helena, it's a great place to go. So we're going to turn it over to Lindsay to talk about the Montana Food Hub. Again, this is kind of a different approach to the food access and processing. It's kind of got retail and all sorts. I'm also telling you, Lindsay is an overachiever with her team because we think 1 or 2 membership levels are hard. No, Lindsay and her team have created 5. So this is a very unique one for us to be on. And Lindsay, why don't you give us a review of it, and then we'll open to Q&A.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, overachiever, I suppose, applies. except I didn't make slides for you today because we were talking about it, and there's not much to show yet. So that I have like a couple of visuals that I'll try to show. Yeah, so I met Tracy 3 years ago, right as she was moving back this way. And I had this idea for essentially a small food hub, right? Like I wanted a place where farmers could meet customers and we could have some educational elements because that's my background of it. I just wanted a central location for a bunch of stuff. I like the idea of a co-op grocery store, but around here, that wasn't the thing that we needed as much as a hub. We need a central point for all these things. And so we started talking about co-ops and what that offers. And then the idea snowballed. And we had a couple other people who had similar ideas along parallel lines, and Tracy kept introducing me to more of them. And then I got connected with other food hubs and what they're doing. And then the more word got out, the more ideas were brought to the table, and the bigger this thing has gotten. So we're thrilled with where it's going. We're still in the formation stages. We're hoping to do our incorporation probably around the first of the year, although there's still some work to be done. We have a lot of the groundwork laid, but like Butte, there's a whole lot of pieces that have to happen. And because we are doing so many things, it's more interesting trying to bring all these pieces together. So ours, let me see if I can screen share just the image that we have here. Maybe.
Lindsay,
Anyway.
can you just forward it to me and I can screen share? Or which one are you looking at?
I did send you an email, and it just has two images.
Okay.
One is kind of a logo that we have so far, and then the other just had kind of some of the elements. So what we're looking at is eventually probably a retail space, although in the meantime, we may partner with some of the retail that exists here already. An educational side is a huge part of what we're doing, and we want this education to include both consumer level education. Hey, you live in this area. Do you know that these foods grow here? Do you know how to use these foods? Do you know how to eat them? Do you know how to prepare them? Do you know how to preserve them? Because our growing season is short. How do you eat locally and sustainably in a climate where it's not growing much for most of the year? So the education piece is huge, of just looking at food differently, getting the community to look at food differently, but also the education side for growers. One of the problems that we keep running across is that there's a lot of growers in this state who won't be able to afford the property taxes. Yeah, thank you. To keep the land that they grew up on, and with the current things that they're growing, the way that they're using their models. And we go, there's a whole lot more that you could be doing with your land, and we can help with that. So connecting them to some of the national resources, to some of the other models for like, look, here's how you convert your land, just 1 acre, 10 acres, a small part of it to be growing some vegetables, some pulse crops, some other things. And then we can provide you a market for those things to supplement what you're doing, to add to what you're doing, to add a lot of value to what you're already growing, and also to provide local food where we have a pretty intense demand for that. So we want to do the education on kind of both sides of that, and then also bring together already existing retail, some of the wholesale. So like they mentioned, both of their models involve some level of connecting with local restaurants and using already existing distribution. We also want a space for value added production. So this is where a lot of money goes back into the community. If you can not only grow the cabbages, but then somebody in your community turns them into really awesome sauerkraut, then you now have a model where you can make money on the cabbage, you can make money on the retail and wholesale cabbage, and then you make more money locally in your community from selling, distributing all these value-added products, both in your neighborhood and out, connecting with other food hubs, connecting with other co-ops, and providing them with more Montana-made products. Grows local businesses here to support economic development and keeping money in our communities, but also just giving some ways to keep local food local. So then also working with the ranchers and the butchery side of that, and using whole animals here in our state, and keeping some of our animals that we raise so well here in our state as well, and giving people access to those. has become part of what we want to probably include. All of these are still ideas at this stage. Like we said, we're still finishing some of the formation. But there's really a lot of directions that we can go with this and a lot of ways to pull all these things together. And now I've been connecting with more and more food hubs across the country and what all they're doing and ways to connect with them. And it just keeps growing with what we could do. So it's really cool to have one point to be able to go, oh, hey, we have this group that wants to do this thing. Let's add that in. Hey, we have a group that wants to do this thing. Now they have a place, right? And so our goal for us at this stage is really to just create a space for bringing all of it together where they can go, all right, I have an idea for a thing. Let's go talk to the food hub and see what they think. Let's go start at the hub because they have the kitchen space, because they have the parts that we need, right? The plans. We're kind of helping them overcome some of those initial hurdles for starting a business or doing any of the things in this space that, especially here in Great Falls, have been basically insurmountable because we don't have access to commercial kitchen space here. So, and that gives the smaller communities around us access to some of these things as well.
Great.
I overwhelm Tracy every time. It's great.
Every time I meet with them, I'm like, you're doing what? Okay, let's do it. But no, you don't. Cole and Chrissy heard me say that too. I'm sure, like, you're doing what? Okay, let's figure it out. So we like to be challenged. I'm just gonna say part of why I selected these 3 co-ops is because they are in different phases. And as Lindsay said, the Montana Food Hub is pretty new still. They're not even at incorporation yet, but they've been meeting for about 9 months, 10 months or so. And they have producers, they have downtown retail companies or businesses, they have educators. It's really been an interesting project to be on the ground level and working all the way through. And just the vastness of what that one showed is part of why I wanted to showcase, because every community is different and every co-op is different. And it's really important that we don't come in when we're working with anybody with a cookie cutter approach. Like, we really do try to understand and let those on the steering committee and that formation stage run what they want to design. And so we're up for the challenge, Lindsay, even if I send you a bill for some gray hair like dye here soon. With that, guys, I'm going to go ahead. We have a series of questions that have come through. First, Cole, there was a question to you that what, if any, are the major hurdles to get the slaughterhouse built and operational?
I think that capital is sort of the easiest thing. It's always been number one. I think, do you know that you can run enough livestock through that facility from the get-go to pay for it? And that is a question of both the custom demand, which I think is that's the thing we most have going for us in the short term. And then you know, the other thing is that, do you have a brand that can move product? And that's what you kind of have to prove over time. And so I think that just, are you able to keep the facility you invest in busy? Are you confident of that? That's the hardest thing to come to wrestle with, I think. And then number two, or it might be just tied for number one, is labor. And that is, do you feel like you have the talent and the skill set to cut meat? And then, do you think that you can attract employees? You know, if you've got somebody, like we have a whole animal butcher now in our team, and he's a talented person, and at the same time he can't process enough in a work week to make that facility break even. That's for darn sure. So that person has to be able to teach and train and find people that want to be a part of it. And so that labor component is huge. And those are the two things that are, you know, most keep us up with respect to the slaughter facility.
Thanks, Cole. Chrissy, a comment that was made earlier to me during your presentation asked, like, were the 2 previous grocery stores that closed, were either one of those location or are either one of those locations kind of in the running, or what did you find out with those when you guys were looking at location?
Sure. So one of them was the Stokes, and no, that was scooped up by $2 stores actually. So that was not an option. It was also pretty big for that space. It was much larger than that 4,500 retail space that our market study projected we should be aiming for our store. The second one was, yes, absolutely, the Hennessy Market. Honestly, when we originally were looking at spaces, our plan was just to roll right into the Hennessy Market and just open up a grocery store there. But what we learned from our market study was that the projected sales volume for that location specifically was significantly lower than what we should have for our sales per square foot. And that was due to its actual location. There's no dedicated parking. It's street parking. It's not very visible. It's sort of tucked into a corner in town. And it's not all that easily accessible. So those are three factors that are really going to affect our overall sales volume. So that was, again, our original plan was just to go right in there. But when we saw that, I mean, it crushed our dreams a little bit, because it would have been nice to go into a turnkey store. But we also know we have to make sure we do this. And when we do this correctly, and it's for the long term and sustainable. So the Hennessy might still be an option, but right now, still looking at the numbers, it probably will not be, given the projected sales volume from that study.
Thanks, Chrissy. And Lindsay, a question that was posed to you is, what town are you thinking to center the hub? But can you also maybe expand with what the regional conversations have been so far in your discussions?
Yeah, so we're all centered in Great Falls. My steering committee is all in Great Falls, and it's a nice central location for a lot of the things we're trying to create, because it addresses kind of that golden triangle area all the way up to Canada. Helena has some options for some really cool things that they're already working on, like coal. Butte already has some things. Butte and Bozeman have some things. Billings has some things. Kalispell has some. So we're kind of that nice central point to be able to connect all those things as well, potentially, as we get this up and running.
Great. And Cole, a question that came in for you is, do you anticipate adding more producers in the near future?
Yes, I guess the answer is we certainly anticipate growing the co-op. And on the beef side, you know, the founding ranches raised 5,000 head. And so we've got a ways to go before we achieve that kind of scale. We may add producers if they add a species that we don't currently raise, and an expertise, you know, like with hogs or with poultry, which we eventually intend to get into. In one case, you know, we're considering adding a ranch that has a location that fits really well with where we'd like to put this slaughter facility. And so that's a reason to add a new co-op member early on. But I guess at the moment, we sort of feel like we have a critical mass close to a critical mass on the producer and the worker side. And we're trying to focus on getting a couple enterprises going and generating some revenue. And then we'll begin really developing our livestock production protocols, our land monitoring techniques as we go. And that will help us as we recruit new members who, you know, just align with the way we want to produce.
Will you be adding any capacity for wild game?
We don't plan to. This is, I think, going to be focused on domestic livestock. It's going to be focused on, you know, USDA state inspection.
Okay. Thank you, Cole. Chrissy, you have a question towards you. It says, what impact has escalating real estate prices had on your plans? I'm going to start with Chrissy, but I actually would love Cole and Lindsay to jump in on that one too. I know Montana Food Hub has definitely had some discussions on this.
So that's an excellent question. Since COVID, particularly, Butte has seen a ton of change in our real estate market here, as well as a lot of development or the plans for development as well. So we know that's going to have a big impact on how much money we have to raise. That's why our financial feasibility study is going to be really a critical piece for that, to help us understand what is going to be financially feasible here in Butte. So we aren't quite there yet with we're choosing a location, but we do know what our original plan that from our study that we had in 2019 is it's definitely going to need to be updated. We've already seen that 2 of the potential locations that we were where we're going to use, those have actually been purchased and developed already, or in the process of development. The Hennessy market, as I said, the sales per square foot just really isn't at that threshold we need it to be. So the short answer is I don't know how it's going to affect it, but we know that we are going to need to raise probably quite a bit more than we had originally thought. And we don't know if we're going to be building or leasing a space. We do have a location committee that is currently being assembled, made up with community members, including some real estate professionals, to really help us guide us through that process as well. I mean, the good news is that we are seeing sort of this renaissance here in Butte, right? Like our uptown we just had a master plan done here. We're working on implementation for that. So I think we're going to have a lot of really neat new choices, which is going to probably cost us a little bit more than we're used to.
Lindsay, do you want to add anything from your perspective on what's happening in Great Falls?
Yeah, we've had a similar thing happening here where there's been a lot of growth and a lot of development, which all supports what we're trying to do, and we're excited to be a part of it. It just means that our budget is going to be a lot higher than we maybe would have ever guessed a few years ago when Tracy and I started conversations about what that would need to look like. But it is exciting because that growth has allowed us to have a lot more outlets for this and ways to connect with new things that also wouldn't have existed.
And Cole, do you have anything to add?
In our case, in terms of just affording real estate.
Yeah, on escalating real estate prices in Montana.
Yeah, I think it's like was said, it's a good problem to have in the sense that people are, excited to be in a place, and that drives up the value a little bit. In our case, the new market tax credits is one of the ways we're trying to deal with that, which, right now the cap rate just would not justify the renovation of this old building that we're trying to do in Helena. And so basically that 20% private capital that buys tax credits that have been allocated to an opportunity zone where job growth is a priority and the local, economy is, needs a boost. Those new market tax credits, if we could secure them, basically just makes that area more affordable than it otherwise would be.
So there's a couple of questions directed at Cole relating to the byproduct of animal processing. Is there a mechanism, or are there plans on the rendering side or bones, that kind of stuff? But I think I'm going to throw that to you, Cole, first, but then Lindsay, I would like to hear that, because there's also, you're talking about processing and what could be potentially used and what you're going to do with excess or anything that happens at the hub. So Cole, go ahead and tell us what your plans are.
Yeah, the byproduct part it's really critical. If you are in the conventional meat industry, that's your whole margin, basically. They sell the meat from a carcass at a loss and make money on the byproduct. And so as small producers, we need to get better at making money on the byproduct. I guess I'd just say a few things. I mean, one is that selling an organ blend, but with ground beef, is something that some grass-fed producers are doing that we may try to do as well. I just was on the phone yesterday with the entity out of Canada that is putting beef organs, livestock organs into supplemental pills. The Savory Food Hub, for folks that are certified under their ecological outcomes verification program, become eligible for a land to market certification. And that, so they have a deal with, for example, timberland shoes, and longer term, that may be a way that we can move our hides and actually, add value to that. In the short term, though, much of that stuff will be composted on site until we have a way to capture value from it.
And Lindsay, what's your thoughts? Because you're not doing meat processing per se, though that was a nice twist they threw at me the other day. But from the table food processing, you're going to see some potential for byproducts or compost or something. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, so the fun thing is that there's already a company in town who does cold composting, and he's got a pretty good method and system already set up for that. So we can do some of that. We can also just be the place to connect people who need the compost or people who need the byproducts, chefs who want to use some of the offcuts. and people who want to create products with the hides, right? Letting it all be one central point where they can go, hey, we have these things, who wants to use them? And people go, oh, hey, I know how to use that. Is kind of the whole point of a food hub. So hopefully that stuff works itself out among the community, because that's the goal.
In the chat, Cole, another one that was directed to you, but I'm going to have all three talk about that, is workforce. The specific question is, do you have the capacity to include community education in your work? And are you thinking of, like, the Missoula High School has that butcher meat school? Would the apprenticeship be an option? So get your take on that. And then Chrissy and Lindsay, I would like to hear kind of your workforce plans, because workforce is such a key issue as we move forward on any business development in Montana.
Yeah, I would say that we just hired a person, and I think some of you know Micah Eller, to focus on community engagement and events. And one of the aspects of community engagement for us is, how will that flagship facility in the 6th Ward, if that's what we are able to do, how will it engage the community beyond the, is there a commissary space that is needed? Is there an educational cooking courses, or, you know, meat processing training that we could provide in that space? We would absolutely love to develop an apprenticeship program on the meat processing side. We have been talking with, you know, the Farmers Union as they work to develop their facility and their program at Northern, and have been trying to stay abreast of what's happening at Miles City Community College. And I reached out to the Missoula High School program early on to see if they might have any graduates who could help begin and seed our program. At that time, they basically told me that they weren't aware of anybody who was sort of ready just yet, but we absolutely want to engage as many, you know, potential pipelines, not only for employees, but as apprenticeships, or even just high school students who are just interested in an experience, you know, something pretty short term to kind of dip their toe in the water. I really think that workforce engagement overall, like how we can get employees increasing their skills and having value beyond simply their pay, is feeling part of something that's bigger than themselves. All of those things, quality of life, I think that's just going to be like the #1 priority.
And we're seeing a lot of interest in employee ownership, whether it is creating a stock option for your employees. One thing to keep in mind with co-ops, guys, and why a co-op is different from an ESOP is that when you have ownership, your common stock always has one vote, regardless of if you have, like in Coal State, in Old Salt, they have an employee and then they have the producer, but they all have equal votes. And one does not get to really dictate over anything else. And when we're talking about an ownership from an employee standard, we're really seeing this conversation happening around childcare, is, you know, giving that voice to the employees and the ability to maybe just sustain them because they'll have ownership part. Chrissy, what about you guys in workforce?
Yeah, so we aren't quite there yet with fleshing out all of that completely with workforce. We will be probably, hopefully in the next several months, we would probably start our hiring for a general manager. We do know from our market study that we need to hire a general manager that is experienced in the food co-op space, that will really help us get off the ground. I think a lot of these startup co-ops need those general managers that have that experience. You know, from learning from other startup co-ops, I'm on a peer call every month. This is a really tall order. It's pretty hard to find someone that has that space or has that capacity to really, you know, take over what the board has done and grow that co-op. But having an experienced general manager is going to be really critical for our overall growth. Another thing that the board decided would be important is that having an employee on our board, and that is something that would be elected by the general membership. But we do have that as an option. I need to go through the bylaws and the nuances of that, but we will have an employee once we actually have an employee that will be sort of a ad hoc person to represent the employees on our board as well. in terms of like the actual structure of workforce, I think that's something that our financial feasibility will help determine as well, of how many people we need for each position. But we do want this to be, a place that is a really positive, great place to work. We want folks to have a really good experience there, because that's going to translate to the consumers and the member owners. In terms of community engagement, this is where co-ops, I think, food co-ops have a little bit of fun. There are so many cool programs out there that food co-ops have thought of. Right now, we're still in the early stages, but having this be that community hub for nutrition education, partnerships potentially with Montana Tech, partnerships with our local farmers, ranchers, suppliers, cooking classes, classes on how to shop on a budget, things like that. I think that's where co-ops really shine and really engage in their community. It's more than a grocery store. You can go and shop up and down the aisles, but it's really sort of that community aspect of it and the education aspect that's going to make it really shine as the store.
Great. And that kind of feeds into, Lindsay, some of the discussions you guys have been having. What about your workforce? You guys have talked about the colleges being engaged somehow. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so workforce will be an interesting thing for us, and it will depend a lot on how we phase in and where we start. By looking at not starting with the retail side first, that cuts a lot of our labor requirements. But we do have partnerships already kind of with the local school district here, and we're talking already to some people at the college about, hey, this is some things that would bring and some cool options for that. The K through 12 school district here, some of their outreach people are like so excited about what we're doing because they see the potential for any of their clubs, any of their internship options, any of their like out of school activities through the school to really be able to shine working with a food hub, working with all the things that we could do, and being able to let the students explore job opportunities and entrepreneurship programs. And as far as the education side, that's the side I already do. I already have a cooking school up here. Like, that's what I already teach. So being able to kind of roll those things and build those things and scale them from what we're already doing will be a natural progression here in town, because people will already be aware of a lot of that. And we can kind of build hype before it even happens, which is kind of cool.
Nice. So we are going to be wrapping up. I think I might have missed one or two questions. Cole, I do want to point out, somebody said, don't forget the rail that could be potentially coming through the south side. So a comment. Before I turn this over to Mark, though, I want to briefly ask you guys, just not like a 2-sentence response. What is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you started the co-op process? So I'm going to start with Lindsay. What's one thing now that you wish you knew 9-10 months ago, or when we first had that first cup of coffee?
It's going to take so much longer, but it's going to be really fun.
Okay, great. Chrissy?
Yeah, that's a good one, Lindsay. I totally agree with you there. Don't put the cart before the horse. Follow the process. Try not to think too far down the road. Really think about what the immediate next steps are, because that's really going to dictate, I think, overall success for the co-op.
And Cole?
I wish I knew an accountant and a lawyer who were super familiar with co-ops.
I'm working on it so hard to find you some. We do have a short supply. I completely agree.
I appreciate
Chrissy, we're keep trying to steal Leo from you guys to help us across the board, and they're like, no. So Mark, we're going to turn it over to you first. Before I do, I just want to say thank you, guys. You all have been, each one of your co-ops have been just a wonder to work with. We're thrilled. We're so happy and so proud of where you all are heading and what you've accomplished to date. I think that, in a normal, non-virtual world, we would give you a huge standing ovation, because you guys are doing some amazing work. But Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. And I want to extend my thanks to you all as well. This has been really inspirational and has given me a lot to think about. And I want to thank Tracy, especially for being such a fine facilitator and moderator. I grew up in a small town called Geraldine, Montana, which has a small food co-op, and some of my family is involved with that. And I'm just really excited of the work that Tracy, you and the Montana Co-op Development Center have been able to do in that town. So thank you all. Thanks to all of the attendees. This was well attended, and I think we all learned a lot.